Yes, Your Worship.
Good evening. I'd like to call the City of Merritt Special Meeting of Council to order on Tuesday, August 31st, 2021. Welcome to those in the audience and those online as well. Do we have any late items?
No, Your Worship.
Okay. Public input. We have two individuals. Betty Ann Maxwell, is that how you pronounce your name? Okay, you're up first. Could you give your name and address, please?
2855 Scott Place, Merritt.
Could you come
Oh, sorry.
up to...
I signed up last. How the heck?
You're the first on my list.
Good evening, Your Worship, Council, staff. My name is Betty Ann Maxwell. Contrary to what some might believe, because I do enjoy talking, I don't like public speaking, but this is really important to me. I've lived in this valley for over 50 years. I went to high school here, and at that time I didn't appreciate the valley quite as much as I did as an adult, raising children. Over the years, I've done many things, and many of them included being a volunteer for this community. At one point, I was your ESS director for many years. I was invited to be part of a provincial team, and we were called out whenever there was, for PEP, whenever there were fires, floods. Now, to tell you how far back with ESS I worked, I helped house it and help with the, when we had the ice jam. So I don't know how many will remember that, because some of you probably weren't even born. So I attended Barrier Fire, Mount Boucherie, Kelowna, Seminar, and Kamloops. And I believe I represented Merritt in a positive light, or I would have been invited. Over the years, I've raised money for our community, from high school rodeo to hockey to, I was part of Nicola Valley Women in Action, and part of a board that brought the very first counselor to Merritt, because we didn't have one. And there began Nicola Family Therapy. I continue to volunteer in that. When the evacuations happened with Lytton, I didn't say, and I'm honored to say, and I'm humbled to say, that I am the president, the leader for the Métis people in the Nicola Valley. So for the Nicola Valley District Métis, again, I'm humbled to be their leader. And I'm also the women's representative, and I'm very humbled to be that and to work with Métis Nation BC. I think it's a really important role, right from birth to elder. When the Lytton fire happened, my Métis community goes from Spence's Bridge, Lytton, Cache Creek, Ashcroft, Lillooet, anyway. So that immediately I called some of our families in Lillooet to check and see were they okay, was there anything I could do. And the lady I spoke to said, you know, Betty, I'm sitting here at the registration center and I'm registering people. And I just had someone walk in with no shoes. She didn't run out with take shoes with her. But she had her cat under her arm. That's her family. And I thought, oh my goodness, of course, that's family to so many people, whether it's your cat, your dog, your goldfish. So the third day I went and I checked in with Lonnie and asked, back in my day when we were working on evacuations, we worked with a group called Noah's Ark. But again, that dates me. But I know that the part of most PEP plans, any PEP plan that I've ever been part of, had one for animals. And I asked Lonnie, I heard it was called CDOT, are they being called in? And she said, not that I'm aware of. I called a friend who had done this type of thing. She said, I'll be there in 2 days, find us a spot. So Nicola Valley and District Métis, along with, now I always get the name wrong, so I'm not going to say it, / Cat Rescue, which is our group with Angie. We opened up a pet response. I did phone the city, but I couldn't find a spot. No one had a spot for us to open. Gratefully, and I hold my hands up to School District 58. He said, Steve said, give me a day and a half. A day and a half, and I was in the central school lunchroom with pet supplies starting to arrive. Again, Merritt looked really, really good because the word was sent out through all the different rescues and all the different helping with animals that we had opened up a response for all the animals coming in. And in fact, I didn't know, and I now understand that there's 3 kinds of scratch for chickens. I didn't know that. I was learning, and I needed some. They put out the word. I got $1,000, or the response did, $1,000 donation from Australia to help, and I had it sent to Purity Feed. So we could buy hog food, chicken scratch, all of these things I hadn't even thought of. So once again, the Nicola Valley looked really well. And I'm grateful that I was able to do that. And I'm still running it. It is being run by myself. And hands up again, my Métis summer student is a young man that's tall with muscles. So he lifts all the food, I don't. Well, it lifts a bit, but. So in saying all of this, I don't mean to take up all your time. What I'm saying is, I've given a great deal to my community. I love this community. Every time I come over that hill, I think, oh, I'm so grateful to live in God's country. But through that, since I started helping Angie with the cats, and she's given her heart, her soul, her life. She keeps telling everybody I'm giving away our retirement. My husband retired. I'm a foster parent, have been for many years, raised many, adopted many, and I'm still fostering. I can't see me doing anything else. I love my life, it's not a job, so I'm still doing that. But I cannot handle the fact that this community allows animals, cats, dogs, to be treated like they're nothing. We have cats that are brought to us, and I'm quite willing to pay for people to sign affidavits saying they brought them to us. From lakes, from pullouts, highways, trapped cats that they see thrown away and bring them to us. Because people in this town trap them, dump them at lakes, they become coyote food. And they don't care if it's a neighborhood pet, it's trapped. It's irritating me, it's peeing in my garden. I understand. But there has to be a better way, a compassionate way. Angie and I support the entire thing. And I must say, Mayor Brown has given us ideas, but because there are 3 or 4 of us doing it all, Angie's crawling out her houses in the dark, rescuing other cats and kittens. She's in the bushes. I've rescued a few, but they break my heart. Paul Mulner worked so hard to save a cat that was barely more than a kitten that I found. And someone had put something caustic in its mouth and burnt the roof of its mouth out. And he tried very hard because he knew how much it was bothering me. But he couldn't save it. But those are the kinds of things that we see. I can't go on some of those because I carry them too much, as I do some of my children who have been through really traumatic times. Speaking to that, I want to say something else. And this is not in any way, I realize, council's problem, but I think a really clear voice has to be said. If ever, and I will say his name because he identified himself, Mr. Gray chooses to follow me because I'm part of a cat rescue, I will drive directly to the RCMP station and he best be charged. If ever he comes to my home and is in my front yard taunting me like he did Mike and Angie, he best be charged. He will traumatize, re-traumatize, and trigger things in my children. He has no right to do that. And this city needs to loudly say that behavior is not acceptable. And he is using your names as his defense. He says, I have friends in City Hall. They have said they're going to change, what did he say? Put in the bylaw that says it's illegal to feed any stray cats. Anyone caught will be charged. And I know this because my friends tell me. Again, I wouldn't want my name used that way. So I guess all I can say is I so badly want to work with the city. I want to work on a trap and neuter. I want it somehow that the rental agencies let us know that someone's moved out and they've left a cat. Your last bylaw officer called me a couple of times and said, Betty, I just want to give you a heads up. At this address, a cat's been left. And so at least we know that we can try and go and get it and so on and so forth. The whole province is overwhelmed. All the rescues are overwhelmed. But we will do our very, very best to help each and every one of them. I've talked your ears off. Told you I don't like public speaking, but I do enjoy speaking. But I'm just so passionate about this, and this is all I wanted to say. Respectfully, I appreciate you all listening. And if I've stepped over any boundaries, offended anyone, that was not my intention. My intention is simply to say, let's work together. Let's show compassion. Let Merritt be known as a city that has compassion, not just for elderly, not just for the homeless, not for the just for the children, but for the animals too, that through no choice of their own are starving and injured. I thank you. I hold my hands up in gratitude to say thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Before you go, I have a question.
Okay.
The TNR program, Trap, Neuter, Release. Release is meant to be adoption, in my mind. What do we...
In other communities, no. And with the SPCA, no. There's feral colonies, they call them. Kamloops has several large ones, including one on the North Shore. And so trap, TNR is trap, spay, release, right? And that is back to their feral communities. Oh, there was one more point I wanted to add. It's my understanding that some may equate feeding a cat here is going to bring in animals. For instance, I live on Scott Place. We had a little bear that was harming nobody. Come next door, as they have for the last 20 whatever years I've lived there, to eat the fruit off the trees because the fruit's not picked. And they come usually across the highway by the daycare is how they come. We've had those bears shot several times. A couple of years ago, they were shot and left in that great big field for a couple of weeks, which is, again, don't get me going there. This city has always, because we live on their territory, we took their land, the same as some would say, and I agree, with Indigenous people. So we're saying to them now, oh yeah, we're We're living in your territory, but you don't get to come here or we get to kill you. Years ago, I used to do, I was a youth worker. And we walked at night in the summer to check on teens all over town. The bushes along the river in Rotary Park, which you cut way back, used to every year it housed 2 bears. We all knew. Anyone who used Rotary Park respected that, stayed away from there. We didn't antagonize them, we didn't, right? On Scott Place, I've got the highways all around me, right, basically. Sadly, at night, you can hear the coyotes, because the coyotes come into town. When I was younger, I didn't know what a coyote looked like, and I used to feed one. I thought it was a lost dog. But they come, and they do steal neighborhood animals, and you can hear them, right? So it's not that my feeding a stray cat on my front doorstep, which I do, if anybody wants to check me, I do. Because where I am on Van Street and all of those, there's a lot of basement suites. Do you know how many people move out and leave their cats behind? Too many. So those coyotes are coming to get your dog, your cat, not just my stray cats that I'm feeding. They don't come for that. They never eat the food because they don't come that close to my house. So by feeding the cats, whether it be the park or it be anywhere else in town, we aren't attracting stray animals. This is not the same as the coyotes down in, when they say don't feed the animals, they mean don't feed the bears. As you so rightly tell us, be careful with our garbage, because if they get used to that, then it's my fault they're coming. Those trees, and I'm not begrudging my neighbors, please don't think I am, but those trees attract them, right? The not picked fruit. They're just trying to get back for winter, and this is going to be a hard winter. We've lost so many in the fires, and we're going to lose a lot to starvation. So, sorry, you shouldn't have got me started again, I apologize.
I understand your compassion, and I think all of us hear it clearly. You do have a compassionate heart for animals.
For everyone.
Does anyone have any questions for Mrs. McDonnell? No, it doesn't look like it.
You're afraid to get me started again, I know. Thank you.
Next we have Taylor Cox.
Good evening, everybody.
Taylor, can you give your name?
I'm Taylor Cox, and I'm speaking on behalf of my grandmother, Molly Perry, who resides at 1614 Greg Street. This is in regards to the same issue as Betty Ann just covered, because of the apparent threats of a mass killing of the feral animals or feral cats in the city. I just want to say, over the last 30 years, my grandmother has housed, fed, and fixed well over 50 forgotten, feral, dumped animals, and cats, well, mostly cats. There's been a few dogs in there as well. And at one point, about 20 years ago, there was a program with the city where there was a deal between a homeowner, if they had feral animals, feral cats on their property, where the city would pay a third, the homeowner would pay a third, and then the vet would pay a third. And they did that for about 2 summers. They would go around, catch all the feral cats, and fix them, and if they were able to be rehomed, they were rehomed, but at some point, you know, you can't really turn back and get the feral out of the cat, so they were returned, you know, to my grandmother's, or there used to be the big problem where the train station was and stuff like that. And over about a 5 to 10 year point, the amount of feral animals really dropped in town. It really seemed to work, just doing it even that two summers. And I think that that would be the best option for the city, as like Betty Ann said, these animals didn't choose to be homeless, they didn't choose to be born, they didn't choose this life. And it's not up to us to take that away from them, take what life they do have away from them. So if there's a solution to make it that over the next 10, 15 years, we can eliminate that population, we should do that. Taking the spay and neuter program and even having an incentive for homeowners to have their cats that go in and out, have them spay and neutered, make sure they're tattooed and chipped and stuff like that. Have an incentive program, because a lot of times it is house cats going out that aren't fixed and impregnating the feral females. I mean, even in the last, 5 years alone, what did you say, Betty Ann? Maybe we've been able to catch and fix and rehome about 10 to 15, but at any point there's about 20 cats living in my grandparents' shed that my granny spends at least $1,000 a month on food and changing bedding and all that stuff. And my grandmother, she's just about 89 years old, and she's been doing it for the last 30 plus years. It's getting to the point where she's not going to be able to do it anymore. So if it's not being done by her or Betty Ann and Angie and their other volunteers, the problem's going to get even worse. So I just feel that there needs to be a better solution than just taking all these animals' lives away from them. There needs to be an incentive for people to be proactive and get their animals fixed right when they need to be fixed. Have them, chipped and tattooed so that, if they do end up missing, they can be brought home. There's a lot of people that have had their animals go missing, search and search and search for them, and they never find them, yet they end up finding them on the other side of town, right? So what my grandmother has asked me to say is that, that program really worked. I mean, even though people don't want all these feral animals around, they're gonna deplete. It's gonna deplete over time if this program is taken seriously and the community gets involved with it. What was the last thing she asked me to? Sorry, she asked me to ask her something. Oh, she just wanted me to, just to reiterate that, it's not just it's a we problem, not just an individual house, because a lot of people call my granny's house the cat house, and, there's a few other people around in Collettville and stuff like that have all these feral animals come to their home, but it's because they know that they're going to be safe and taken care of and fed, but they're not. They weren't caught early enough. It wasn't caught early enough. So if we can go around in times when, we know kittens are being born, or even if it could be an all-year thing, right, where the city pays a quarter, the homeowner pays a quarter, and the vet, or if we could work out some sort of fundraiser idea to have, it covered, we can have this problem rid of in, a matter of 5 or so years. It should be able to bring it down to a manageable amount where, people aren't ripping their hair out by the roots because they got 30 cats running all over the neighborhood. That's all that I had to say, but thank you very much. And my grandmother thanks you.
Well, and your grandmother, Molly?
Yeah.
Was she a nurse?
No, but she worked at the hospital for years. She was with the Red Cross.
I was going to say, I thought she was a nurse because she not only looked after the animals, she looked after the neighborhood kids as well.
Oh yeah, she took care of everybody. She still does that, even at 89.
Bill called her the nurse, so that's surprising that she isn't. But, yeah.
No, she's just a really good mother and grandmother.
Does anyone have any questions for Taylor?
No questions, but thank you.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you. We'll now move to 4.1, the adoption of the minutes, special council meeting minutes, July 27th, 2021. I need a mover that the minutes of the special council meeting held on July 27th, 2021 be adopted.
Second.
Christopherson and White. And any errors or omissions? none, all in favor? Opposed, none, carried. We'll move on, there's no public hearing, there's no delegations. We're looking at unfinished business, 7.1. The official community plan update, revised timetable, and Mr. MacArthur, can you give us the staff report, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. So this particular report pertains to the OCP project and specifically some of the challenges that we've been facing this year, specifically COVID-19 and the never-ending waves that we seem to be enduring, as well as the wildfires that we experienced this summer with the alert, etc. So those challenges have particularly thrown some wrinkles into our timetable for engagement, specifically with First Nations, where we were hoping to engage with bands over the summer period, but as you're, I'm sure, aware, most of the bands were either on alert or evacuation over the last couple of months here, and so it's been very challenging, of course, to, and understandably so, to connect with First Nations specifically. But we also, of course, want to engage with our residents here in the city as well on the draft plan when it's ready to unveil or be unveiled. So based on that, we're hoping that we can sort of revise our timetable a little bit. Originally, we were hoping to have the draft plan unveiled sort of later in September and then have some time to review it going into October and then come to council and at least have the public hearing done before the Christmas break. But the proposed plan here, you can see up on the screen, is to push back some of that engagement so that we'll have more time to engage with First Nations before finalizing the draft plan, because we really do value that input from the local First Nations bands, and we want to make sure that we have that content or that input from the local First Nations in our draft plan before it's released to the public. So the idea would be to release it later in October and have some time in late October, early November to do engagement sessions, of course, committee of the whole meetings, which were originally scheduled for mid-September, to push them to sort of late October. And then we would have most of November to revise the document based on feedback from council and the public and First Nations, to then bring it to council for first reading on December 14th. So this timetable here would mean that the public hearing would be pushed into early 2022. And so we wanted to bring this to council to seek your opinions on that and whether you're comfortable with this revised timetable. And there are several options that have been outlined at the end of the report. So this is one option that we're providing, but a second option would be that we make sure that we basically keep the existing timetable and have that public hearing before the end of the year. The third option would be that we take even more time for engagement, and we have this two-pronged approach where we create a list of the most important amendments that we would like to make to the existing OCP, bring those amendments forward this fall, and then continue engaging with First Nations and the public sort of over the winter, in the fall and the winter, and then bring forward the new plan at some point in 2022. So that would delay the project the most, but it would also mean that we would have the most important amendments to the OCP done this fall so that we could continue on other projects that are dependent on that, because of course we want to update the zoning bylaw based on the new OCP on these amendments. The development cost charges bylaw will have some input to that, the subdivision and development servicing bylaw. There's a number of projects that kind of hinge on the new OCP being in place. So this third option would be sort of a way to move those projects forward, but it would also potentially cause the most delay, and I'm not sure that council or the public wants to see this project delayed into mid-2022 or whatever that would look like. So Option 1 is what we're staff are proposing, but any other options that council see fit are also on the table. So with that, I'll turn it over to council for questions and discussion.
Does council have questions for staff? Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mayor. What I'd like to see is the best product at the end of the day, and if you could reiterate which option you feel would produce the best product. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bangdu, through the chair. Not option 2 at this point, because we will have a very difficult time getting the input especially from First Nations that we're wanting with option 2. That's kind of the status quo option, because we're behind schedule on that due to the challenges we've faced. So option 1 would probably be the best, because we'll have a plan without having to, let's amend this existing one and then let's create that could go sideways. I think possibly. So option 3 is not seen as ideal either, but I think option 1 will be able to have a great product that we can present to council and the public come late October. We're certainly working hard on doing that. So, but of course, the caveat to this is that we're able to get that engagement completed as we're proposing, and it's not 100% guarantee that will happen, but we're certainly making the effort to do so. So, option 1, I think, would be the best option for having the product that you're wanting to see.
Anybody else have questions for staff? Okay, so questions for staff, Councillor Luck.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Mr. MacArthur, what are we doing to ensure that we're going to be able to get input from the First Nations and any other interest groups out there? I know we've been trying and that's not effective. Are we time stamping these requests and saying, look, we need to get going on this, and we've got until such time to get it done? Or is there some way we can do that, move these along? Because heaven forbid we're into 2023 to finish this as well. I think it's important to get this done sooner than later, of course.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Luck, and I'm going to turn that one over to our CAO, because he is actually very involved in this portion as well.
Who may point the finger directly this way? Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Your Worship. It is a good question, and what I wanted to say is, and this is really leading to council, what you're going to have in your next item. To do this right, engagement needs to be a little bit different than what has historically happened. And oftentimes when I'm going to say colonial governments approach First Nations, it's, hey, we need your feedback on this already nearly done product or something like that, and you have until X date to give us feedback, and so let it be done. For us, if it's not going to work, or we don't have that a sufficient level of information, which where we're at right now, there's been some degree of input, but as Don said, there's been a degree of challenge in getting there. What we're going to do and what we propose to do is really to attend band offices, to set up meetings and make sure that we have face-to-face contact. That's really highly valued, that's critically important, to be able to get the best information possible, to set up broader individual discussions that would ultimately be looped back with on. So there will be a combination there. It will probably be Mayor Brown and myself will be making the initial contacts and setting up those larger discussions to get more detailed consultation. So that's something that we're looking at planning out and doing again towards the end of September. But I really do want to be careful about saying that there's going to be firm deadlines on any of this. This is going to be about doing it right and making sure that we've got honest and ample discussion about these important items that affect the entirety of the valley. So we think that this is a timeline that will allow for that critical discussion to happen, while also trying to balance the fact that this is a document that's critical for the city and needs to be in place because it is a stepping stone for many other documents, as Mr. MacArthur said. So I would love to tell you unequivocally that I know that we're going to get all of that out front, but until you have that discussion, I can't say what challenges may arise. But we think that this will give us a good start on it.
And if I may add just a moment, Margaret, it's important to note as well that the OCP is a document that can be amended over time, and so ongoing discussions with First Nations will happen over the coming years as well. And so if there's items that come up that are important to local First Nations, or local residents as well, right? That's always something that we can look at creating an amendment to the new OCP in coming years as well. So.
Which I think in the time frame here, late October, early November, after we have our draft, we need to go back to First Nations again and do the same process over again, checking over the documentation.
Many of the issues that have preliminarily come up aren't going to be a surprise for council. It's things like water use, it's things like air quality, it's discussing these critical shared resources that are not just applicable for residents of Merritt, but for everyone in the Nicola Valley. And so I don't think the content of what is largely going to be critical items for discussion is going to be a surprise, but making sure that there is open two-way dialogue that will ultimately lead to the type of community that we all want to see is really the goal.
Thank you. And Councillor Edger.
My only question was, by amending the dates for the OCP change, would it really have a negative impact on any of the other projects that we have for our other planned items that we had discussed further down? Because I know we had our strategic session of things that we want to work on over the next couple of years, but I think that consult is key, because if we don't do it properly, well, we'll have problems later. But would there really be any issues?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Edgar, through your worship. If we were to do something like option 3 and that was extended well into 2022, it would delay things like the DCC's project or the subdivision development servicing project, because those particular documents rely on what we're doing in terms of how we plan our community, because DCC's project specifically relates to what direction we have in the OCP, as well as the 10-year capital plan that our public works and finance departments are working with development service on. In order to sort of align the capital plan and the OCP with these other projects, it's ideal if we can have that OCP adopted before the end of the year. Especially if we have even if we have a draft plan in place, we can at least take the draft policies from the OCP and have them inform those other projects, right? So that's the only thing there, is if it went well into 2022, the OCP project, it could delay some of those projects. So.
Mr. Smith.
The other item that we've honestly, I'm somewhat hesitant to even raise it, but I will say it as a flag because it has become concerns in other communities. Official community plans during election years have at times become political footballs, which may or may not be a consideration for this particular council, but I will say that there's been instances in the past where that has been kind of a rallying point, and there's been efforts and attempts to slow down, speed up, whatever it looks like. And so I think that as best as possible, having this completed, if it can be done in the right way, well in advance of the election, would be the best outcome. But I will again defer to council. I only raise that as an example that has been seen in other communities at times.
Councillor Christopherson.
Unless there are more questions to be asked, I'd like to move option 1.
Okay, we've got a mover for the council direct staff to revise the official community plan update project timeline as recommended by staff in this report.
Second.
Mover Christopherson and second Luck. Councillor Richard, are you?
Well, no, I'm seconding that.
Debate is open. for council? Councillor Van.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. This isn't so much of a debate point, but I'd like to acknowledge our CAO's attempt at breaking free of the past colonial framework that has been used to interact with our neighbors. So thank you for taking a different approach. Mayor appreciates it.
Anyone else? I would like to, this is a tight plan and a tight time frame for First Nations. And I'm just a little worried that we've tightened it too much. Mr. Smith, you're going to tell me?
We'll be wholly honest. This is a tight timeline. Recognizing when we started this process, or when we initially engaged the consultant, COVID was not in our minds, and so we've heard from not just First Nations. We've heard from the public residents in Merritt that there is a desire for in-person consultation, and throughout this whole process we've thought that that was going to be readily achievable at some point 2 months further, and so you have these brief moments where we've been able to press forward, but of course this takes advanced planning with consultants and everything else in order to make that happen, and so by the time we're ready to start ramping up, we're off again, and then we're on, so we start planning for it, and then you're off again. And so I will say that this hasn't come together like any of us envisioned an OCP process would. I don't think it's been great for staff, the consultant, the community. It isn't ideal, and this timeline isn't ideal either. Like, there's a lot of work to be done through this process. That being said, it's our firm opinion on the staff side that we can't really afford to continue under the existing official community plan. It doesn't provide clear direction for the community, which leaves council in difficult position for the decisions that you make, and it makes staff job very difficult when it comes to development permit areas and about 100 other areas as well. So despite the fact it isn't perfect, there isn't a better alternative here than working hard to find a way to make this happen. What I will say is, if it becomes the case, because we would be starting some of the kind of specific First Nations consultation early, that doesn't mean that we can't have First Nations involvement with our broader public engagement sessions as well, and would certainly encourage and invite anyone who's interested to attend those. So I think it's likely that you'll find that there could be some degree of overlap between those two throughout this process, so that it's not going to be, okay, now First Nations consultation is done, now we're on to the rest of the residents of the city of Merritt. There will be absolutely blurred lines throughout that to make sure that we're getting the best, most pertinent information possible and giving people the most opportunities to engage as possible. So I think you're right, Mayor Brown, to have flagged that it is a concern. We're worried about it, but we're going to work hard to make it happen.
And I like the idea that we've got spring 22, and in here we're talking just fall of 2022, and my guess is we're going to fall somewhere in between that. I would like to think that we have a little bit of leeway for our staff because of some of the consultations that are required here. So spring 2022, we can stretch that, I suppose. It doesn't have to be March, it could be a little bit later. But just know that when we do this, this is our point that we're aiming for, but we may not end up there. Councillor White.
I'm sure that, we've all been in the same situation with fires and COVID and everything that's going on, so I'm sure the groups that or the public that needs to be consulted will recognize that and cooperate a little bit, I would think, because they've gone through the same thing we're going through, so I would think that they would kind of step up to the plate and give us a little bit of a break and quicker answers. Thanks.
barring no other emergency.
Don't even.
Councillor Christopherson.
Yeah, it was my understanding in making the motion that dialogue will be continuing with First Nations on an ongoing basis, and I think you've just clarified that very nicely, so thank you.
Mr. Smith? Any other comments? I'm going to call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. So let's see that report. Spring 2022.
You'll see a draft before that.
Yes, that's the important part, the ongoing movement. Now we're moving on to 7.2, strategic priorities. Mr. Smith, do you want to speak to this?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd be happy to, although I think that each of you would be able to speak to this document probably better than I, seeing as that this is really your strategic focus areas. So this document is the culmination of a number of different sessions with council and brainstorming and discussing and taking feedback from the public in order to develop really a roadmap through the end of 2022. And so the idea here is that this would be a document that would kind of transition through to the next council, provide specific direction to staff and clarity to the public as to the types of initiatives that council is going to be looking to make progress on over the course of the next year and a half. Those categories are, as you guys can see on there, it's economic prosperity, sound government practices, First Nations reconciliation, an active and thriving Merritt, safe and resilient community, infrastructure for the future, and environmental sustainability. And under each of those headings, there's a number of different items that you have requested of staff and the community to be working towards. And so, again, we are really excited to support you and your vision in making these items come to pass. There's some of them will be completed long before the end of 2022. Some of them will probably only be just getting started by that time, but there will be progress made on these items. And we will be coming forward to you quarterly to provide a regular update as to where we're at for each of the items under this list and where we anticipate being by the end of the next quarter. So that's something that you guys are going to start seeing as a regular form of reporting from staff. You'll also hear kind of recommendations from us as to the items that we might be moving further down a priority list or a recommendation on that front, and you would have the opportunity to tell us, wait a second, that's critically important to us. We've just heard from residents that this is something that we actually not only don't want to be moving down, we want it moved up the priority list. And so it'll be an opportunity for you to kind of rejig your priorities in terms of what you want us to be focusing on. So really excited to bring this forward, and certainly it's council's prerogative to discuss it and make any changes you would.
Well, and just for the public, we sat with city staff, council and city staff, senior staff for a full day discussing what our plans were and what staff could actually achieve in that time. So it's not just a wish list. This is something that we've looked at and worked at length to work together as a team to make this stuff happen for the city of Merritt. So I, for one, am really proud to see this kind of a document. It's taken us a while to get there, but we finally got there. And the achievement at the end will feel great. At least I will feel great about it. I hope others will as well. So I want to just say thank you to all who participated. This is a document that has been a long time in the making. But thank you all. Anybody have any comments on this?
I just wanted to make one, Your Worship.
Yes,
The one point in acknowledging that this isn't a wish list, this is something that we look to make happen, recognizing that many of council's items really are focused on infrastructure development generally. There still are constraints on the staff side, and we are going to work as hard as possible, but particularly on the development end, I do want to flag that we said earlier that the OCP has some ambitious elements. This is pretty ambitious on the development side, and I want to flag right at the outset that there are likely items that will need to kind of come off, be moved down, and we will do that in consultation with you as we start having more resources coming on, and we'll be really honest and transparent on that at our first available update. So.
And there are also the potential for grants that we need for some of these projects. And if we don't get the grants, the project will move further down the line. That doesn't mean to say we won't do it, it just won't happen by the end of 2022. So we're aware of those kind of constraints as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Just making sure I wasn't backed into a corner before we even started.
Still a great wishes. Okay, and I'm going to ask the question. Hold on. Councillor.
I too would like to congratulate staff and council for sitting around. It was a wonderful day sitting there and discussing all these ideas and everything. And this is I'm going to make a stretch here. It's quite a vision for Merritt, where we're seeing Merritt in the next year. This is a plan for the next year, and it's very, very ambitious. And we've got some great staff that are working through it and everything. But there's some policy changes and things here that we're looking at that are going to make a real difference in our downtown and all around the community and everything. I'm really happy to see this, and it's really, I'm really proud of the document and seeing what's been accomplished in the last 3 years and the next year when I see some of these things in here as well. I mean, things like food truck policy, I'm just highlighting a couple, not charges for patio permits, things like, they're just little things, but what a difference that makes in our community. As I look around the community now and I see restaurants that got these patios out there, what a change is happening in our community because of some of these changes in the vision from this council, which I think is really, really important. And like for tourism, outdoor patios, I mean, what took us so long? Not as us, but other communities that were in the same boat. They were doing the same thing. But here we are, in one respect, thank you pandemic for opening your eyes and allowing us to punch outside the box and things like that. It's been really, really good. But to be able to put these into a document where we see exactly where you're going, covering First Nations reconciliation, economic development. This is about jobs in our community. Really, really important moving forward because we really need those jobs in this community. So this is part of it. You have to have that vision before these things unfold. So thank you, council, and working together there and bringing this. I'm very, very happy with this document, and staff for bringing it all together, and it looks fabulous as we move forward. So thanks everyone, and thanks for the public as well that are going to hopefully embrace this document and be able to see the vision that the council has and staff has to move Merritt forward. So I'm really happy with it. So thanks everyone for that.
And having said that too, this document, as is, will push staff to the absolute limits to get some of this done. So if we as council derail that plan for other things, then that will derail that plan. Just
what? I can't have a pet project there?
Well, you were supposed to have that available before we sat down. But there will be, or could be, things that do come up that do and will derail that. Just so you're aware, this is the way it is and we're not moving from that. We will still have to look at the emergencies, the emergent, and the derailments as they come along.
I should ask, because this was previously discussed, but I would love to hear it kind of around the council table, if there are thoughts as to whether quarterly kind of updates on each one of these projects as formal updates is sufficient for council, and then if there's anything that happens that needs to happen more imminently, we would still bring it forward between that time. But I'm talking the formal updates at the council meeting that would go over every single one. Is quarterly sufficient?
It is for me. Councillor Etchart?
I think that would be appreciated. At least having this focus area document, we kind of have an idea of, well, these are the areas that we're going to work on, so then we can have a guide to refer to, especially when the public asks, about certain projects or what we're planning with water or city park, whatever the case may be. So I think that quarterly update would be nice.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Councillor Fair? I'm just going around asking
Oh,
the same question.
yeah, quarterly sounds great. As you mentioned, if there are pressing updates or decisions or whatever that come up, then we'll trust you to bring those to us as well. So that sounds like a good plan to me.
Councillor Luck?
Yeah, quarterly's great unless you suddenly have a grant that comes in and we can revel in that as well. That'd be exciting. But yes, quarterly sounds great.
Councillor Bangu?
Yes.
Councillor Christopherson?
Yes, quarterly is great. It's nice to be kept up to date on what is happening. It's an exciting document, and I think it's put a lot of thought into it, and I think it's quite doable. Exhausting maybe, but I think the community will really appreciate it. And quarterly reports would be absolutely spectacular.
Councillor White?
Yes, I think quarterly reports are sufficient.
There's your answer. Quarterly reports are sufficient. Now we need a mover that the strategic priorities document attached to this agenda item be adopted by council. Adopted. Councillor Christopherson, seconder. Edgard. So anybody else want to continue to speak to this? We could probably spend the next half an hour. All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. On to, there are no bylaws to discuss. We're at 9.1 new business. The 2021 budget amendments, and Mr. Anderson, can you bring us a staff report?
Yeah, I will, Mayor. This is the staff report for budget amendments, and I'm calling this one Public Works. During the year, after we have gone through the financial plan, approval for 2021-2025 in this case, during that period of having that budget approved and the end of the calendar year, there's a number of requests that come in from different departments for budget amendments. We consolidate these amendments after your approval into one final amended financial plan, which is presented prior to the presentation of the upcoming budget. So you will see this, and you'll probably see other ones, and we consolidate them, as I say. So there's a couple here that we're looking at, and I've got them as Public Works. They are projects that Charlie Henderson can explain in a little more detail here, but I'll just present the numbers as they are. So the first one there is a Oak Street main well pump that needs an electric motor replacement. Fairly expensive motor with services involved. It's about $67,000. There is the commissioning of the Active Mountain Reservoir with a tie-in to the city system. So this time, that reservoir that sits on the hillside servicing Active Mountain is not connected into our water system. It just strictly provides water to that development. So this is to commission that reservoir and then to tie it into the water system. Benefits, Charlie can explain those in a little more detail. So this is what we're looking for tonight, is approval from council to proceed with these two projects and amend the budget accordingly. The financial implications on this, both of these projects will come from the water reserve, water system infrastructure reserve. We had at the beginning of the year about $1.8 million in reserves and surplus related to water. So we have sufficient capacity to fund these two projects. And I will leave it at that. And any questions on the financial side or questions for Mr. Henderson?
Any questions for either staff? Councillor Bear?
Thank you. For Mr. Henderson, I'm just curious about the Oak Street main well pump, where that is, and just what exactly was involved in the requirement for the replacement.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Councilor Fair, so we have two well pumps in Boat Park. One is a gas electric and one is a vertical turbine. The vertical turbine was over 20 years old. During our second heat wave in July, it failed. So Currently, that has a pumping capacity of roughly 115 liters. And about 7 years ago, the gas electric motor was replaced. And due to the new efficiencies of the motors, it actually paid for itself in the savings of power. So we're looking at hopefully being able to pay off that motor within roughly 10 years in the savings of power. But the motor was over 20 years old. Our pump houses do have air conditioning, but when we hit that 42 degrees, 44 degrees, I think just the age of that motor, it came to the end of its lifespan.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor White.
I'm just curious what fills the active mountain reservoir. Where does the water come from?
So, thank you, Councillor White, for your chair. The active mountain reservoir currently can fill from our supply and distribution system, but how the pump is set up is that any consumption from that reservoir would only be from the condos that sit on active mountain. So there is no consumption currently on active mountain. And currently that reservoir is not tied back into the city of Merritt supply and distribution. However, we can feed it, but it doesn't get fed back into it. So for the reservoir to have consumption, we need to feed it back into our supply and distribution so the residents can consume that water. If it is not consumed, then it stays stagnant, and then we have interior health issues. So with this $100,000, what we're looking to do is install what's PRV, so it's pressure reducing valves, and that will now feed back into our supply and distribution. This will aid in fire protection, fire storage, and overall storage for the city. So it's a relatively cheap fix, but it's something that will feed into our pressure zone. So we have two pressure zones within the city of Merritt. We have one on Grandview Heights, and then we have one for the remainder of the city. This will feed pressure zone 1, which is the remainder of the city, and not Grandview Heights.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff? Seeing none. I need a mover and a seconder that council approve 2021 capital plan budget amendments for the following two public works projects. Electric motor replacement, Oak Street main well pump, $67,000, and commissioning of active mountain reservoir with tie into the city water system, $100,000. Moved by White, seconded I think by Etchard. And any debate on this? Okay, I'm going to ask the question. All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. We move to 9.2, which is our IT policies. And Mr. Anderson, can you give us a staff report, please?
Yeah, so today we're presenting the IT policies for council consideration. These policies were presented August 10th to the Policy Review Committee. There are 3 policies here today that we're taking a look at. In general, these policies help ensure that staff have a clear understanding of acceptable use of IT assets, a prescribed process for bringing forward requests for new technology, and guidelines for providing third-party access to our technology assets. They're identified as policy 421, 422, and 423. First one being technology third-party access, the other ones being acceptable use policy and life cycle policy. So the options today are to take these policies and adopt them as presented, or to recommend alterations to one or more of the policies prior to adoption of all or individual policies, or choose not to adopt any of the policies presented. The financial risks and implications, first paragraph there really boils down to the fact that we are prudent with our spending on IT technology. We make sure that we monitor the life of this technology and keep it in service as long as it meets our city standards. We also require, with these policies, a need for business justification at the department level for the purchase of new technology. and a review of existing technology that the city may own prior to purchasing new technology. So just a good process to go through there. The policy on technology acceptable use, one of the key items there is that staff have a guideline now on their responsibilities when it comes to using city technology, including the need to stay current on any provided training that we may offer with regards to security or systems. That's pretty much it. If you've had a chance to review them, have any questions, I'm here today as well as our manager of IT, Jim Johnson. If there's any questions in specific, we'd be pleased to answer them.
And I think these have been a recommendation from the Policy Review Committee, so they've already been reviewed at the council level by committee. So these are recommended to council as a whole. Councillor Fair.
Thank you. Just curious if you could provide an example of a third-party access situation. Who would that be exactly? How would that come about?
Through Councillor Fair. The third-party access that normally happens is we may be using a piece of software and we call a support line for assistance, and they may have a tool that allows them to access our screen, so being able to see what we're seeing on the screen to make sure that the product is working as designed, or provide assistance or training. So that's one of the ways that third parties may access our systems. We may have contractors or consultants that come onto city premise or remotely to access different applications or data as well. So those are the other examples of third-party access. So to make sure that they are well vetted and have signed off confidentiality agreements and non-disclosure agreements and so forth.
Our auditor would be one of those individuals.
Auditors, yeah, that's another good example. They could have access to the software as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, that helps me understand that better. Thank you.
Any other questions? See none. Does somebody want to make a motion that council adopt the following IT policies as presented? Technology third-party access policy number 4-21, technology acceptable use policy number 422, and technology life cycle policy number 423. Moved by Councillor Lux, seconded by Councillor White. And any debate? Yeah. Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? None carried. Move on to 9.3, BC Transit Fare Free Transit Allocation. And do we have staff speaking to this one? Mr. Anderson, is this one of yours? BC Transit.
When did you have it last time?
Fare Transit Allocation.
I can speak to this certainly, but it's what it is a offer from BC Transit for children under 12 to be able to ride the buses for free. So that's what the policy is here today. So getting sign off on that, and then also the impact financially of what that might be over the time frame of September 1st to March 31st, 2022. So revenue impact of approximately $1,800 or $261 a month for offering up the program.
And any questions for staff? Councillor White.
The monthly amount is $261?
That's correct, yeah.
Mr. Smith.
Sorry, Your Worship. I just wanted to make it clear that the reason it doesn't, add up, you're not seeing 12 full months on that, is because it's only running from September 1st, 2021 till March 31st, 2022, at which point it'll be incorporated into the annual operating agreement the next time around. So in case there was any question as to why this is not adding up from an annual sum that's in excess of $3,000. So that's why. Only partial year right now.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I do wonder, with children under 12 riding for free, if that will increase ridership for single mothers or single fathers taking their children. I wonder if that will offset the costs that we actually see. Is there any
through Councillor Bangu, through the chair. There's a possibility, and I'm not sure if they factored that into their number here or not, but yeah, that is a good point that by having them able to ride for free, that might increase other ridership.
Okay, see no other question? Oh, Councillor Luck.
Councillor Bangu, that was a great question. So I just want to add to that. Are we going to be able to way to monitor that to see if that happens? Because obviously we've come up with a number for the $261 a month. So we want to make sure, especially when it gets built into the transit agreement next year, we want to make sure that we're capturing the real number, right? So that was a great question, Councillor Bangu.
Yeah, through Councillor Luck through the mayor. I'm not sure exactly how we'll monitor that with COVID and the way things have been over the last year. To be able to compare year over year is quite difficult now, but we will definitely have some numbers on adult ridership over this time frame compared to similar time frames in prior years. So we might be able to make some assumptions based on that.
Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else jumping in, so I'm asking for a mover that the amendment to Schedule A tariff and fares for the 2021-22 annual operating agreement to formally reduce the fares of children 12 and under to $0 is approved, and that staff be authorized to execute the amended BC Transit 2021-22 annual operating agreement. Christopherson and Etchart. And any other debate on this issue? All in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. Move to 9.4, Policy 5.8, Outdoor Water Conservation Policy. And Ms. Brick or Mr. Henderson? Ms. Brick first for the staff report.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Mayor and Council. The next item that is up for discussion tonight is the Policy 05-08, the Outdoor Water Conservation Policy. I should note that there have been some changes made to the policy since it was distributed in the agenda. So the most current version is the one that is distributed on table tonight. This is revised up at the top.
Does everyone have that copy in front of them?
We do also have copies available for members of the public that are available at the table at the back here if anybody wishes to have a copy.
And are you going to let us know what the revision is?
Where's the
This has been an interesting policy to work on, so it's been very rewarding to see how it's developed throughout its progress here. The policy has been in place for a number of years. So we had a policy back in the 1980s. Sorry, 1998 is when the policy first came into effect here at the City of Merritt. And the Policy Review Committee met in August to do a deep dive into this policy and to propose revisions. And following that meeting, staff met with the ministry, and there was a few more revisions that were proposed that have been implemented into what you have before you tonight. So the policy, the first part of the policy that's been proposed to be changed here is to remove the starting date and the ending date for restrictions on watering. So May 1st to September 30th, this policy would be removing that, and any restrictions would be based on what's happening in real time on the ground here in Merritt, in conjunction as well with the ministry. So we'll be able to determine what should be in effect, what our current situation is. And this will prevent situations such as us having freshet at the same time as starting long restrictions, which has been a problem in the past. So that's been removed. The committee had requested under the exemptions piece to change the word may to will. So that's been done in this policy as well. So upon application, the city of Merritt may grant exemptions for watering restrictions as long as the drought level for both the Nicola and the cold water basin is 3 or lower. The revisions to the policy as well, it includes a table 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. These tables, they lay out very clearly for residents when watering can happen, what level that watering of lawns can happen at, and the timing that they can choose that works for their family, either in the morning or in the afternoon, or if they have an automatic irrigation system, then they can do that overnight. The hours or the amount of time is the same for everyone, no matter which way that you choose. So you'll have 2 hours to sprinkle if we're at levels 1 and 2, 3 days a week. If we're at level 3, we would move to 2 days a week. And if we move to level 4, then it would be 1 day per week. The table 2.0 that we have in this policy, this table, it aligns with the provincial guidelines for drought preparedness. And we have levels 1 to 5. And for lawns, level 0, you can water your lawns at any time. Levels 1 and 2, you are able to do it at 3 days per week. At level 3, you'd be able to water 2 days per week. And at level 4, we've done it so that, or it's been changed in there to do 1 day per week. And then when we move to level 5, if we ever get to level 5, hopefully we don't, then it would not be permitted. Food security was something that was identified as a priority for the committee. And vegetables, vegetable gardens, flowers, trees, shrubs, planters, at level 1 they can be watered at any time. At level 0 they can be watered at any time. At level 1, you can do it anytime using a hose with a auto shut-off nozzle, and you can also do it 3 days per week in accordance with the table 1. So it can be done with an automatic sprinkler, similar to what you would do with your lawns. At level 2, food security is still maintained, and you can also use your sprinklers 3 days per week. At level 3, we reduce the sprinkling time to 2 days per week. And at level 4, it's still 2 days per week. Even at level 5, we want to make sure that food security is maintained, and you can water with a auto shut-off nozzle at any time. Car and boat washing, you can do that at any time at level 0. Anytime using a hose with an automatic shut-off nozzle at level 1. And this encourages good water stewardship. In level 2, same thing, you can wash with an auto shut-off nozzle. We encourage people to wash over grass or gravel, so the water gets soaked back into the ground rather than going into our sewer and storm system. Level 3, you're still able to wash your cars. At level 4, we ask that people wash their windows by hand. At that point, water conservation is really important. And at level 5, it would be the same thing. Water conservation is really critical at that point, and so there would be no washing of cars at that point. Surface and power washing, as you can see here, one of the things that we changed in the policy following the committee's deep dive into it was that at level 4, you cannot use the surface and power washing, but if there's a legislative authority, so for example, if we needed to do it for health or safety reasons, then we can use the power washers to clean blood off of a surface if it's required, or that sort of thing. Pools and spas, we do expect people to really be cognizant of it. We're at level 2 and 3, you can top up your pools, but removing all of the water and replacing it, that's not encouraged at that time. And at level 4, it wouldn't be permitted, or at level 5. Bulk water supply, we do provide water to to outside sources as well, and so that is important for members of the community to have access to that. It is restricted at level 4 when it becomes really imperative that we don't have it there, or that it's restricted, so that we're very cognizant of our water safety here. And those are the main changes in this policy.
Thank you. And note that these are residential water uses. We do not restrict commercial. Mr. Smith.
You can tell there's a number on council who are looking to speak to it. I just wanted to flag as well the other change is in relation to lawns, that at level 4 it would be permitted 1 day per week, whereas under the old edition you saw it was not permitted at level 4. So we're currently at drought level 4 in the city of Merritt, and we currently have no watering. So if this policy were adopted, it would allow up to 1 day per week under this existing level. The caveat here is that if we are ordered by the province, that is obviously going to supersede any municipal policy on this front. What this is really an effort just to make sure that we are well aligned with what we're seeing from the actions of other communities as well, recognizing that our community doesn't necessarily have the exact same factors as other communities, but felt that this was a balance taking into account some of the comments from the public, while also working extremely hard to preserve our water supply. And as you'll see with the water statistics that are on the agenda later in this this meeting, the water usage for August is way down from what it was in, say, this time of year in 2016 or in 2020. Sorry. And that's largely because of people's efforts to conserve water. And so these measures do have kind of drastic effects on water usage, but we also want to encourage that there can be some reasonable use of water, so long as people are on board with the fact that once we get to that level 5, or if we get to a provincial order, it's going to be treated very seriously. And in fact, I think that the municipal response in terms of enforcement, so far we've been pretty gracious with individuals. It's been very much educational, but at level 5, if that were to ever materialize, it would be, I think, much more rigidly mandated. So I just wanted to flag that for you, that was the other change in this iteration of the policy, was the shift at level 4.
Thank you. Councillor Bengu.
Thank you, Mayor. You might have touched on this, Sean. I was taking notes as you were talking. Level 4, bulk water supply, where it says restricted. Is there a mechanism to determine who will be restricted and who will not?
So in order to access our bulk water supply, you have to have like a fob. You are a supplier, so the way you access it, you can't just get at our bulk water supply unless we know about it. And so all of the suppliers that we have on board, we can have conversations directly with them about what amounts of water they'll be able to take in. I know that there was a lot of comments this year from folks that were concerned that Trans Mountain was using it, and recognizing that their camp size never really got up this year, and as well they had a number of evacuees that were staying at the Trans Mountain cap, and so we made sure that they had sufficient water use, but we absolutely had those conversations, and for any of their dust suppression that they were using this for, we cut that off absolutely. So we do have conversations with each of the suppliers and have that ability because they're on a city fob service essentially.
So it sounds situational.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that is not essential, we're going to cut. Like for example, the dust control, if you're using water for that stuff, it's going to get cut completely. And then we're going to be encouraging solid water use practices on their end to ensure reduced water use on their ends.
I think the word essential did it for me. Thank you.
Councillor Christopherson.
Just a niggly question, because I know that somebody out there will ask me about it. On table 1.2, the 2 days per week regulations, level 3, the odd numbered houses go Tuesday and Saturday, which is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday without water. But the even numbers go Wednesday and Friday, and there's only 1 day in between. I'm just curious why we didn't go for Monday and Friday and have sort of the same amount of days in between watering. I know some gardeners out there will ask.
That is a good point. We also want to allow for space between days to replenish the reservoirs so that we're not doing back to back to back, so that there is sufficient time as well to replace the reservoirs.
It's so I think that's a good point. It's something that we can look at. We've worked at this in some respects backwards, from the sense that when people are pulling these on their dials, like let's say they're on an automatic trigger, we wanted it to be so that when you pull off a day, you don't need to ever go back and put on a different day. So you can see that at level 1, you pull off 1 day, the Monday, and the Monday for the evens, and for the odds, you're pulling off the Thursday. Once you get to the level 2, and then you're pulling off the Wednesday and the Saturday at the level 3. But if we were to have it where it was Monday, Friday, and you wanted to have an equidistant split once you get to the level 3, such that it would be, you're not having to add a day back on, I know this isn't making sense. In order to have it where they're 3 days apart at level 3 without having somebody pull a day off and then add a different day back on.
No, you wouldn't have to do that. If you had it on Monday, you would just leave Monday on there and pull off Wednesday.
Right, so you do Monday and Friday is what you're saying, and
yes.
Pull that off. And then when you get to the end, you leave it at even
You
Friday.
just leave off the Monday and you only have Friday.
I take your point. I think that's a good suggestion.
From someone who keeps screwing up his system.
Public Works,
It's
do you
nice
have
to
any
keep it
concern with
simple.
that? I don't think there's going to be any issues there.
Okay, thanks.
I only made a point of that for the.
Good call.
So move that one to Monday.
Thank you. And so now we are, oh, sorry, Councillor Luck, I did look that way.
Nope, I put it on after you turned away. Sorry. Thank you, Mayor. Just one clarification. So these levels 2, I think it's in the document, body of the document, just to be very clear to the public, that these level 2s are set by the provincial government. Is that correct? So we're going to be following their leveling. So they come out and say, hey, in this region here, Thompson Vickers Regional District, for example, that's going to be a level 1, and that's the provincial government that dictates those levels. We got clarity on that. Is that right?
The provincial government does set levels.
Yeah.
So they have levels. These are in alignment with those levels. Moving through the levels, it is the city that would set the levels for the city in conjunction with the province.
With the province, yeah. So so level 1, that we would set that once the provincial government says we're at level 1. Is that right?
Yes. Levels are set based on what's happening on the ground here in Merritt, as well as guidance from the province.
Guidance from the province, yeah. We're not setting these levels independently. We're working in conjunction with the provincial government. So that's really, really important. I just want to make sure the public understands that as well as council, that that's exactly what's happening. We're not just throwing darts and saying, hey, we should be in level 4 or something, right? That's in communication. That's an important piece here. Okay.
Well, and I think instead of waiting till level 4 in order to make these restrictions, we're doing it gradually. So it won't be as harsh when we move into level 4. I think that's key. Any Councillor Benton?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just a point of clarity on that. I got slightly confused. I initially understood it as the province hands down what they would like, what level, and then at the city level we decide if we would like to choose that level. Is that correct?
Decisions are made in conjunction with the province. The province, based on 30-day forecasts, snowpack levels, there's a whole science behind all of that that I don't understand. The province sets levels throughout the province for each community. Each community moves through their levels. They're not always exactly in lockstep one with the next, but it's based on the best advice that we move through the levels.
Mr. Smith?
So I'll try and provide as much clarity on this as possible. So first off, when we say the province, yes, it's the province making decisions, but they have, it's a large drought response team that has people from many different organizations, First Nations, and others that collectively make a decision as to what the drought level is in the region, having looked at the data for each stream, each tributary, what the precipitation data is, and all of these different factors. And so it isn't quite fair to say it's the province. It's not like there's one person sitting in their office that's prescribing, here's the drought level for Nicola.
Thank you. We will resume the meeting at this point. And we are, I think, voting on the policy 0508, outdoor water conservation.
Still needs to be moved and seconded, Your Worship.
The mover was Christofferson and White. That's correct.
Oh.
Okay. I got that right. Thank you. And we're looking for debate. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? None? Carried. Okay, we're moving into notices of motion. Okay, I have a couple here myself somewhere. I'm putting forth a notice of motion that staff review the distance between cannabis stores within the city of Merritt and report back to council on the available options. And this is due to the things we've heard from the public that 150 meters is probably not far enough, or mainly from each other, the 100 meters. And I just need staff to look at those options and report back. The second notice of motion is after hearing from contractors that our earthworks bylaw 2313 is really constrictive for them. I would ask that staff consult with local contractors by way of an open meeting. And I know that we are not obligated to consult with contractors, but I'm asking that staff do consult with contractors on this bylaw and report back to council with recommendations or changes, if any. And the third one is I'd like to ask for a staff report on fire smarting our community. Where are we? Where do we have to get to? Approximately what would the cost be and how would we fund it? And Councillor Etchart?
I wanted to move the motion where option 3 in the information items, where council could opt to implement a trap neuter spay police program, because I feel that after hearing a lot of the information tonight, it seemed to be one of the things that people are concerned with about proper care of the animals. As someone who loves animals, I do look for an option that maybe if we could work with Kamloops SPCA and the program that we had, that would seem something that we could work with.
Okay, can I ask what your notice of motion is?
The third option, where council could opt to implement a trap meter space and release program.
Your Worship.
Sorry,
thank you, Worship. I just wanted to suggest that if you would like to discuss this or sooner, like immediately at this meeting, or of course you can move it as a notice of motion if you'd like to discuss it at the next meeting, but considering that there is an information item as item 12.3 on the agenda, you could simply move the motion at that time when the report is discussed. So it's either one of those are viable options.
Yeah, that would be fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And moving on to reports from council. Councillor White.
I have something that's been bothering me for a couple of weeks actually, and I'd like to say it here in the public rather than on Facebook or Grapevine. And it's regarding the unfair criticism that Mayor Brown received during the chaos of the fires surrounding Merritt. First of all, her responsibility is to the citizens of Merritt. TNDRD is responsible for all citizens outside the city of Merritt boundaries up to other communities with the mayor and council. As soon as the city received fire information that threatened the city of Merritt, it was communicated to the public immediately. It was obvious that the public was not aware that the mayor was not privy to all updates and information ahead of the areas that were being directly affected and out of her jurisdiction. Therefore, the criticism I feel she received was unwarranted and spiteful. I want to thank her for her due diligence and her efforts professionally and personally for her handling of the fire situation that affected the city of Merritt directly. And thank you.
Hear, hear.
Hear, hear.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
Any other reports from council? Okay, we'll move on to information items. 12.1, capital plan update. Mr. Henderson, the floor is yours. Oh, I guess I should give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Council. I'll go through some line items, and then maybe we can have a discussion after. There's a few items to touch base on. Our sanitary station has made quite good progress. This is the only item on the sheet that is over budget due to unexpected BC Hydro costs. We are looking to have that commissioned within the next 2 weeks. Everything is on site and ready. We're simply waiting for BC Hydro to come on the site to pull a couple of wires and to provide power.
Can I stop you at this point or ask a question at this point before you move on?
Absolutely.
How much over budget are we?
I believe it's up to 106,000.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just going to ask one question because this is the number that'll get reported out. Is that offset by the reduction in the bulk water?
No.
That's the offset amount. Okay, thank you.
So that's the gross number. Thank you.
Cemetery expansion phase 1 is complete. The hydrovac replacement is complete as well. Boat Street phase 2 construction, we have an unsuccessful grant application.
Can you explain the 20%?
20% was time allocated for grant application, grant writing, and during, I believe, a bit of a carryover of costs from 2020.
Thank you.
Your Worship, I'm just going to add one point on that. At your next council meeting, we will be bringing forward a report with some options for council as to where we go with this next project. As it was designed even for this particular grant, it was split up as potentially a multi-phase project. And so you'll have some decisions as to whether you want us to go out again for the full shebang for the grant amount, whether we split that up and fund a portion of the project out of municipal funds or debt and grant fund the rest. So we will be bringing forward a report for your consideration just so you guys are aware that that will be coming.
And you still have to talk to the funder as to rationale.
We'll bring back some specifics as to what the comments on the application were as to why.
Thank you.
The Boat Street Phase 2 design is complete. The Coldwater River Works along the Boat Street, or sorry, pardon me, the Coldwater River multi-use path, that engineer work is being complete with the environmental management plan, and we're looking for construction in 2022. However, with the recent grant notification for Boat Street, we may see some projects start being bumped down the list to following years. KVR pedestrian bridge, which was an erosion control for the footings of the bridge itself, that is complete. Survey equipment for our engineering department, we are simply just waiting on the delivery of that equipment. The RFP is closed, evaluation complete, and contract signed. The wastewater treatment plant master plan was also an unsuccessful grant application. However, we're proceeding utilizing the sewer fund. Hydrant replacement. This project coincided with the Vote Street Phase 2 construction, which we will not be seeing in 2021. However, we will be proceeding with that program in 2021. The valve replacement, which was also tied to the Vote Street Phase 2 construction, will be postponed until 2022. We were hoping for an earlier start, but with materials being ordered, we won't be able to complete this capital project. Our RRFB, the rapid crosswalk lights, we have received them. This was also an RFP. The evaluation is complete. It was ordered. It has been received. We will be working on its installation for September.
How many did you order this year? An additional?
An additional six. Six crosswalks.
Thank you. I know I keep asking you that question, but I keep forgetting the answer.
Security cameras, we're still just working on the RFQ, and from that point we will place our order. The new dump truck for the Public Works, the RFP is currently live. UVT meters, this measure the UV dosage with our supply and distribution system. That RFP is closed, our evaluation is complete, and we're just waiting on signing the contract for that project. Update of the SCADA computer for the wastewater treatment plant, which sounds all alarms to our cell phones and radios. That computer has been upgraded and is complete. Wastewater treatment plant platforms, this is just a safety man working platforms, and we are just putting the finishing touches on the RFQ for that. Flood restoration, we're still working with the engineers to develop a proper design and environmental management plan, as well as applications to the province are currently underway. Bridge repairs is complete. This was a simple project that needed a sign off from a structural engineer for the Middlesboro Bridge. That project is complete. Armstrong Street civil design, I'm currently working with the design team, and we'll be looking for end of year completion on this. So once we'll have this, we'll have full engineered plans for Armstrong Street reconstruction.
And we're looking for a grant next year to complete it?
Depending on which direction council would like to move in with the Vote Street Phase 2, and we'll touch base on that on the next council meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Cleesby Street connection, I'm currently working with another engineering team. This is the connection between Colchena and Coldwater, right by the Fairleigh Park. So we're working on involving our active transportation plan, a possible redesign of Colchena next year, as well as this is going to allow for fire access to be provided. But once again, this is simply just design, not construction. So we'll have any engineering plans to attack multiple grants with what comes up.
And I think I distracted you on two other ones above that. Downtown washrooms.
Oh, pardon me, that was an unsuccessful grant application.
And why 40% finished? What went into that? Just, again, the grant application
and engineering and design. So we had to have that design ready to go for the grant application, so money was spent.
Okay, thank you.
Pardon me, I must have missed over a couple here. The West Merritt Active Transportation, engineering is currently underway. The pickleball courts, we met substantial completion. I did a sign off on the project today, and we'll be communicating that with the Pickleball Association. I did let them say that they can play as of this afternoon. There will be 2%. There's some cleanup to do on the perimeter, but that project is essentially complete. Water utility master plan. We're looking for completion end of December, and that will amend the master plan for alternate sources of water. Water metering planning. This is a program that's underway, and we'll have a plan to go after any grants for universal water metering throughout the city of Merritt. Fire hall expansion. This project is complete. Falls Water Station. This project is complete. And Boat Street bus shelters. You may have noticed on the Boat Street Phase 1 pad report, and we had a successful grant application, and new bus shelters will be installed the week of September 6th.
Any questions for Mr. Anderson? Doesn't look like any. Thank you. Councillor Fair.
Not necessarily a question, but a comment,
Sure.
if I may. I just think it's very impressive to look at all of the completed projects and all of the progress that's made on many of these projects, considering all that we've been through in the last year. And I think it really goes to show how well this team is working at accomplishing the goals that are in front of them. So thank you for that.
Well stated. Thank you. Okay, and we'll move into 12.2, water use update. And these are information items, so unless we bring forward an issue, we're just gonna...
And I can go through the chart if you'd like as well.
Okay.
I think the main point before I get started, we'll start with the second table, that we will be on track for lower consumption in 2021 compared to 2020. These dates are up to August 11th. That's when we kind of compiled all the data. And then unfortunately we went into a bit of a fire situation, so we're a couple of weeks behind. I would have liked to have had kind of a week prior to the meeting, but this data is for up to August 11th. We also used the most factual population that we could and the most up-to-date population with BC stats rather than using the census.
And are we comparing to the exact date or the full year, full previous year?
So 2021, we used the 2020 population, just due that we don't have those numbers for 2021 yet.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith.
Just wanted to make one point, and I think this is probably evident from what Charlie said, but just to make sure council understands, because it looks like when you look at just chart 1, like water use is actually increasing, but that's because the next 5 months are historically low water use months, and they will pull that average down below. When you look at the comparison between 2021 and 2020 in chart 2, you'll see that in all but 2 months, water use was lower, and in many of those months it was significantly lower, especially August. So we're definitely trending well ahead of 2020, so don't be alarmed by the fact that the interim statistic looks higher, because you've got traditionally low water use months coming up that will pull that average down.
Thank you for clarifying that.
That's very well said. Come January 1st, at the first council meeting in January, we'll be able to pull together kind of the whole annual consumption. But it is hard, as Sean kind of mentioned, when you're producing this document in August, when we don't have our very low consumption for the fall and winter.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Henderson or comments? Thank you. We move on to 12.3, animal control options. We have 3 members of the public here that are anticipating something. Councillor Eckhart, you wanted to make a motion previously?
Yeah, that motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and that motion was to implement the trap, neuter, and spay and release program to help control the population of abandoned animals. Because it just, if through a volunteer association that could work, it would make sense. I don't think that what we have now is the best plan. I think, anyway.
Are you asking staff to bring a report back on
Yes.
that program?
With option 3 about implementing the neuter and release.
Mr. Smith?
If I'm recognizing that the option hasn't been moved and seconded, so if you'd like, Your Worship, we can.
No, seconded, it's not.
Oh,
Moved.
correct. So I can wait until it's seconded if that's.
I'll second.
Thank you. And you seconded?
So council is aware that we've run trap neuter release programs in the past, and I think it's actually worked quite successfully and largely on the backs of the work of Angie in particular, but Betty Ann as well, and others who are passionate in the community. One thing that I would say that was a hindrance is the fact that this program had historically been grant dependent, in that we would go out for this $5,000 grant from BCSPCA, and some years we got it and some years we didn't, which meant some years we ran it and some years we didn't. The key when it comes to trap neuter return programs is that there's consistency in this, and so what I would like to do is have direction from council to seek this grant funding, but that we would provide funding of up to $5,000 to continue on the program regardless of whether that funding comes in or not, because I think that consistency would allow us to really continue on. And so what that funding would go to, there was a huge amount of volunteer hours, so I'm going to say massive thanks to that. But I actually think the program worked fairly well in that there were volunteers and at times our bylaw officer as well that would take the cats that had been trapped. That would go to, the funds would then go to spaying or neutering those animals, as well as taking care of, if there was any, I'm not going to use the right word, but parasites and other, that's exactly right. Some other kind of basic care items to ensure that those cats were taken care of before being released back. And so, as was mentioned earlier, this can be a very successful program, but consistency is the key, and we just haven't had that historically. So if council chooses to pursue it, I actually think we might have enough information that you could just direct the implementation of that program without a staff report if you're comfortable. If it was happening in the same basis as what we had before, we could start at 5,000 and then make a recommendation for future years depending on.
And we've got a mover and seconder. Are you asking for this to be included?
Yes, I think we need to move forward with something, and it just seems like the best option. And if we have the volunteers that are passionate about it, it just seems like the most sensible thing to do.
Okay, we're still in the motion.
Yeah.
And is there agreement on the additional grant being used?
Yeah, I'll second that as well.
Okay. Did you have something to add, Mr. Smith?
Just wanted to confirm, is this a motion for request to bring back a report or to implement the program? And if it is implement, is it for 2021 or 2022?
I was thinking implement, so please clarify. That's right.
Implement.
Okay, and what year are we talking?
Immediately. Sorry.
So immediately for this year, which is almost at the end of the year.
This year, it's not really season, right?
We have lots of time to do this.
Okay. And funding source, you guys aren't going to like me. I would say council contingency, but
you keep using up my contingency. And you keep telling me it's not my fund.
Well, we saved 20 feet.
I tried to use it last time, but you got smart and kicked it out.
Yes.
Okay, from council contingency. Ms. Quick.
Sorry, just for clarification for the minutes here, would you like me to read back the resolution that I have at this point?
Yes, please.
Okay. That staff implement a trap, neuter and spay and release program through a volunteer association, and that funding be provided from the council contingency fund up to an amount of $5,000.
starting in 2021.
If no grant is received.
Yeah, we're still going to
And to apply for the grant.
I don't think that probably needs to hit the resolution, because we're going to fund it for 5,000 no matter what, and we'll separately apply for the grant if it comes, great.
For next
So I think you can leave that out of the resolution.
Well, that was the issue, was that we're probably not going to get a grant this year, so.
No.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so then the resolution is going to read that staff implement a trap, neuter, spay, and release program through a volunteer association, and that funding be provided from the council contingency fund up to $5,000 for 2021.
And can we add something that we're looking for grant funding on an annual basis?
Yeah.
But we will fund it.
And that council directed staff to apply for any available grant opportunities as they become available, or something like that.
I said it just that way. It would have taken me a long time to get there, but, yeah.
I like this communal motion that we just put in.
Yes, just one more little edit to it, Your Worship and Councillors, if I may. Where we say to instruct staff to insert the words on an annual basis, because otherwise all we've done so far is commit to doing it in 2021, and as Mr. Smith explained, this does need to be a multi-year program.
I like the words on an annual basis.
Should we limit that to 10 years, 15 years?
At any point in the future, Council can choose to terminate the program.
Yeah.
But this would continue, as most of our programs do, on an annual basis until such a time as Council should choose to terminate it.
Or until such time there's no other problem. No longer needed.
Yes.
Councillor Luck first, and then Christopherson and
Yeah, I like where it's going, but I do have one concern. A trap, neuter, spay, and release program. The release is concerning me. We haven't solved the big problem of feeding feral cats. If we just spay and neuter and let them go back to the community, we're back to the... So this has solved one of the problems. We're going to try to reduce our cat population, if not eliminate it. I guess that's what the goal is, to eliminate the feral cat problem. Is that right? So over time, that should happen. But what's going to happen here, we've got a release program. I would like to change that word to adoption program, because I don't think we're planning on releasing back in the community. Are we defeating our purpose, spending good money after bad, letting cats go back as these feral cats, even though they're spayed and neutered, somebody's going to wind up feeding them. Is that correct? So I certainly don't like the word release. That's bothering me a lot. So I'd like to see the adoption, because I think that's your goal. Is that right? Adopt these cats?
It is, but it doesn't happen overnight. We have to build their trust sometimes. When I first moved here in 2004, I had 17 feeding stations. I'm down to 4.
Well, that's good. That's what we want to do. We want
again,
to eliminate the thing, but they're not to be released back in the community. Is that what I'm understanding?
No.
No, that's what I'm saying. Not to be released, to be adopted out to the community.
some of them can be. Some of them take time. And the kittens are removed immediately.
We find other communities take them. Right now, if you go across BC, we find out how many people are there. Sorry.
We've also got an online audience here, so for you to say anything, you'd have to come to the podium so that the audience can hear as well.
I'm just trying to get clarity on the whole program here.
Yeah.
If we're just going to capture and expand some of the best of the
And if I can just, I'm kind of with you. It's releasing maybe into the parks. If we release to somebody who will look after it, and a few years ago when I was talking to United Way, when they were doing our program, what they said was they release to somebody in the community. They don't just release them. But I have concerns over releasing in the parks.
I'm concerned about that too. And I think a few citizens, that's why we're here tonight, because there's some citizens that are concerned about that. And I think Councilor Edgar, it's the same thing. We're just going to spay and neuter and send them back in we have the coyote will eat them if they're spayed or not. So, I mean, that's I think our end goal here, is to make sure they get adopted up, I would think.
It is the end goal, but it doesn't happen immediately. Some of those cats, there's nothing feral in this town. They're all at different stages of abandonment from our locals.
Well, that's a definition of a feral cat, though, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, okay, but again, I mean, it mortifies me to look around my community and know people that are abandoning them.
Okay.
And they're not held accountable.
That's right.
You know, I know people that are abusing them, not held accountable. I know people that are breeding them to make money as opposed to getting a job. It's disgusting 17 years later to be in the same predicament. So unfortunately with TNR, and you request that money from the SPCA annually, their program states, you trap them, you neuter them, you return them. Babies are the only thing that we're allowed to bring in, unless we can videotape and document it's an extremely friendly cat that's adoptable right now. And with some of them, because I've done this on my own accord for 17 years in your community, some of them can be picked up right away. Some of them you have to build their trust. Like it's not just a, oh here, I'm gonna take you into my home and make you friendly. That just sets them back even further. I deal with a gajillion other rescues and a gajillion veterinarians on this. So some of it can happen, some of it can't.
Yeah. We got off track a little bit here, so we need to get back to council discussion. Public.
Yes, I'm going to do that.
Thank you for the clarity there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to say something.
Oh, well, I've called for point of order so we can get back to council business, so the public's had its opportunity for input, so, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
You asked for clarification and I was
Well, I was asked for clarification from the staff.
Okay,
not the
I'll let her
public.
speak. Thank you. Go ahead.
Obviously it bothers you. You know what? I would love for you and all of those who think it's easy to adopt them out to come and join us. Please come find us foster homes, find us adoptions. If we could take each one to a foster home, we would. Because we would know that it's not being tormented somewhere. As for the parks, there's 2 cats there. We're working to trap them. Because someone's tormented them, they don't trust to go in the trap. Right? And that's the humane way to do it. We do it any other way, we'll be charged.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Your Worship. It was actually raised here, but the point I was going to make is that the funding is for a trap, neuter, release program, and so I can check, but to my knowledge it does not. That's the way the program is structured, with the idea that it isn't an immediate solution to the problem. It's a solution to the problem over the course of 5, 10, 15 years, and that it would allow for, I don't know what the right way to say is, a humane life for the existing cats, that they'll live and die a natural life after being had some care provided. And so I think that if this is going to work, my concern is that if the requirement is that each cat had to be adopted out, where would we keep those cats after neutering them? We don't, like our I can tell you right now, our pound is not facilitating, like the cats have to go somewhere, and if there isn't an immediate availability to adopt, which some cats might be very easy to adopt. They're cute and they're young and they're not too feral yet. Other ones, it's not going to happen. Like, you'd be crazy with some of these cats with a little bit further down the road. They're just not. They're not going to be house cats that are adopted in. And so I will say that from I am not a cat expert, but from an administrative perspective, I see some serious hurdles with running a requirement of adoption program. I would love to see if there's a way that we can kind of implement that and try to work it in where it makes sense, where it's possible. And I think that that's something that we could probably work with locals to achieve, because I take your point. This is about trying to put cats in the best position possible. And so if we can raise awareness and get cats into good homes, that's an awesome outcome, which I think is what I'm hearing from council. Yeah. So long as it isn't a requirement that if that can't happen, imminently here, you've got to have a place for these cats to go, and that's where they were
Even if we have a place for cats to go, they've got this homing device that they just return to what they know or where they came from, and I think that's part of the issue with people moving. Their cats keep going back to where they used to live. So that's been my experience. So next was Councillor Christopherson.
Thank you. As a caretaker of a cat that won't come in the house and has its own mind well made up, it has been neutered. It's actually a very friendly cat now, and the furs and everything else took years not to scratch it. A lot of cats you just don't put back into somebody's house, ever. My question is, but I think they do need to be taken care of. My heart goes that way. Do we need to identify the volunteer program that we're talking about, or is it just open to whoever applies for it? So that, I guess that would be a question for staff.
Mr. Smith?
We will roll out specific details and we'll communicate that to both council, because I don't want to say right now exactly what this is going to look like, because I think there's things that we learned from previous years and I would love to have the opportunity to discuss. And so allow us to work on implementing that, and we'll bring that information back as to how one would access these services and who they would call, etc. So because I think that the specifics in terms of the project, I just don't want to make any commitments yet, because there are some particular concerns that were raised in previous years that I would want to see if we can address this go around, and I haven't had those conversations yet, obviously.
And the addendum with that then is, we're not voting on this motion tonight, so we're actually discussing a notice and motion, aren't we?
No.
We're voting on this tonight.
We're moving on this motion, so then do we need to know the information I was asking about? It should come to us.
Right now you're directing us to implement a program, and so we would then go and design and build this program, and we would have the authority to implement it, but we would absolutely share those details with you and with the public at large. So I want you to know that that information would come back.
And Councillor White?
I'm just curious if this is it's obviously a non-profit, why the funds can't come out of the grant and aid? Is that
There might be opportunities for that. It's just the grant and aid has a specific policy and a specific process, and that's not how we went through this one. But I get what you're saying. I think that's good feedback. So maybe in future years, this year it's coming from council contingency, but we can look for its kind of better home in future years. So good feedback. Thank you.
Councillor Fair, did you had your...
I did.
Okay.
Thank you. Just sort of waffling on whether or not to try and add to the conversation. But I think that, unfortunately, we're kind of in a situation where we're at the mercy of the practices of the past, and as has been explained by staff, that this is the most effective program when it's run consecutively year after year. So I think, and as the SPCA says, that this is the only effective way of reducing a cat population. So it seems to me that it's just time that we, as has been said, that we implement the plan for this to continue ongoing, and we will see the desired solution for everyone.
Thank you. And Councillor Bangu.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree, Councillor Fern. I think even the problem or the concern of feeding stray cats will reduce through this program. I do wonder if there's any preventative or education approach that we can take as a city to encourage people not to abandon their cats, and if they are to purchase a cat, it's a lifetime commitment type of thing. Something to consider.
It's good feedback.
Mr. Smith?
One point that didn't come up that I will raise for you and would happen if you had a full staff report on it. While this program will likely be designed so that it's, significantly the time of others goes into the trapping the cats, and I'm not making a commitment to have by anybody in the room here. We'll also discuss how that can be done for their safety, the safety of others, to make sure that this is done in a way that the community is going to understand and be on board with. The other point that you'll need to know is there is going to be, particularly our bylaw officer's time. Like, there is some administrative cost to this program as well, so the real cost will be more than $5,000. That's what will go for veterinarian expenses, but there's additional costs that are built into this program. I will say that I think that it's worth it. I think it will make a difference. I'm supportive of it, but you need to know that that's not the only cost that's associated with this program.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask the question. Oh, Councillor Enter.
Oh, I just wanted to add that these situations aren't easy to deal with necessarily, but I think that if we don't take some kind of action, we have to show positive on both sides. And listening to the concerns of the people that have come here today with their passions for the animals, I think it's kind of the happy medium of trying to help them with the animals, and their willingness to work with us seems like the best option for trying to reduce the population and also care for these animals humanely. So I'm happy with what we're proceeding with. Thanks.
Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just since it seemed you were about to be looking at calling for a vote, can I just suggest, as it's been a little while since we built the motion by committee, that we ask Ms. Brick to read it one more time so that you are all very comfortable and confident of what's being voted on.
Thank you.
Your Worship. So the resolution as it stands right now is that staff be directed to implement a trap, neuter, spay, and release program through a volunteer association, and that funding in the amount of be provided from the council contingency up to $5,000 for 2021, and that council directs staff to apply for any available grant opportunities as they become available on an annual basis.
Thank you. That's our motion. So I'm going to ask, all in favor? Opposed? None? Carried.
Well, you all didn't expect that?
No.
No. So it was worth the wait.
Thank you. Thank you. You make me cry.
Okay, and we have just one other letter, and it's just for information, unless anyone has a desire to speak to that. Okay, and then this is, we move into the closure of the meeting. And I need a mover that this meeting be closed to the public pursuant to section 91C of the Community Charter for labor relations or other employee relations. So Christopherson and Luck, and all in favor? Opposed? None. And we will take a